When people turn to the NES, they think about their action-adventure games and their platformers and whatever the heck this is. But they don't seem to remember this genre altogether. I am the Game Collector and this is Second Opinion Games, and today we look at the forgotten shooters of the NES.
Second Opinion Games.
First up, we have 1943. This was a classic game made by Capcom in the arcades, and pretty much everyone played it. However, when it came home to the NES, many people just seemed to not care that much because the Nintendo had so many different games to explore. Why would you just want to play another shooter? Especially once the Genesis and Super Nintendo came along, and then these just became completely forgotten about. However, it was made by Capcom. That means their sound effects are gonna be great. Also, seemingly that no one even thought about was the fact that you could power up your P38 in different ways. I recommend putting a lot of points into offensive power because you're gonna be shooting down just about everyone, and a little bit of defensive power so you could take more than just one hit. Also, it's probably best to break out your NES Max or NES Advantage controllers because this has no turbo fire functionality here. Now, you can power up your ship, of course, because why wouldn't you be able to? But this is a very standard, bland shooter that not many people picked up, at least not today. Next up, we have Dragon Spirit. Now, a lot of the TurboGrafx 16 owners out there would rub it in the face the fact that this was near perfect arcade conversion for that system. However, the Nintendo had another little trick up its sleeve. You see, when you started the game, there was a slight tutorial level. If you happen to die right away on that level, well, then you'll be playing a dumbed-down, easier version of the game, which I very much prefer because I really kind of stink at these shooters. You have a gold dragon and just a handful of levels here. You could power up really quick with your spread shot, or maybe give the dragon a couple more heads. You could bomb ground targets while blowing everything away. Doing a massive rapid fire doesn't seem to be too hard on the controller. It still takes down enemies really fast, and the art design is darn good. And if you're in for a super extra challenge, well then beat that tutorial section without dying, and then you'll be able to play the full game, where enemies crowd from you all over the place, and it gives you one heck of a challenge. Put a few less power-ups as well, and man, is this ever interesting, the fact that they basically made two games in one with a slightly different storyline here. Man, it's terrific, and I'll take this one over the TurboGrafx version any day. Brutal Fighter is another game I didn't see many pick up. This is one of those horizontal shooters where you could fire in either direction. You also have a variety of power-ups at your disposal, but I think you should focus in on the laser power-up because when it powers up, then you could fire frontwards and backwards at the same time. Because a lot of the challenge of this game comes from knowing where the enemies are going to come after you and also squeezing through really tight spaces. The enemies themselves often look rather generic, and the game is just brutally difficult even on the easiest level. When you want to finally ramp up the level of difficulty, you'll find out that it becomes a whole new game. Every single level has more obstacles to dodge around and a lot more enemies, with very little of that NES slowdown that we've all come to know and love, especially loving it when the action becomes so freaking frantic you can't do anything on screen. And man, this is a really rather unique shooter that many people just completely overlooked. Over Horizon is more of the same, but even more forgotten about. In this game, you could still shoot in either direction, but when you start it up, well then you could customize your ship with the different options. You could place them around your ship in the way you want, whether it just wants to cover the front and the back, or make him a little bit more spaced out. Now, when you're actually piloting your vehicle around, you could hit both buttons at the same time and slightly change the position of these options, so you're not too locked into one path. Also, there's different power-ups here, whether it be a laser or a homing, but at the very beginning you could choose to focus more on the homing, so then you might be able to have homing lasers, or maybe even homing bombs. If you go to the bomb route, well then your lasers will also have bomb properties, which means bosses will be a cake to take down. Also in this game is some puzzle elements with some switches that you have to activate and then quickly move through before they shut, and boy, even the boss battles get in on this action. This is a terrific game for everyone that loves shooters, and I don't know anyone else that even owns this one. Just like Squoon, on top of not knowing how to spell things, S-Q-O-O-N, this is a submarine-based shooter, and one of the few shooters that I can think of that lets you shoot freaking dolphins. Yeah, these things are everywhere. They're not really enemies on the screen. As a matter of fact, they kind of help you out a little bit. Now you see when you start up this game, you have tons of different enemies that are shooting at you. You also have a fuel amount at the bottom, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to run out of fuel and die. Also, one hit and you're dead, and the enemies come at you fast here, so if you try to play without knowing what the heck's going on, you're gonna see game over pretty darn quick. So let me help you out. You have to bomb certain areas to collect people. Then you have to bomb a crab and pick up the little marker before it turns back into a crab. Then you have to take the people up to the top surface and drop them off and get a power up, or maybe even some more fuel. If you get some power ups that make your ship much more maneuverable and also increase the firepower. However, if you get hit one time, you lose all of that firepower and you have to start from the basic beginning and recollect all the people and play through it again and again. This is a terrific submarine shooter, and it's one I keep coming back to. Even if it does look generically bland, it definitely has a crazy concept. Just like Dino Ricky. Now this is essentially a shooter mixed with an action platformer. It also feels like a bullet hell. Man, Hudson really knew what the heck they were doing, and they definitely had a thing for cavemen in video games in general. And also the platforming here is really quite difficult because the screen is always moving. Even if you do stick the landing, you have to move your character down with it, otherwise you're gonna fall off the lily pads and die. Also, that means that speed power-ups will get you killed nearly 100% of the time, but if you don't pick up at least one of them, well, then you're gonna move too slow because this is very much a bullet hell shooter on top of it all. Power-ups in your weapon, though, are something you're definitely going to want to pick up every single time, because your weak beginning shot is just the most pea shooter that ever was. But most of the time, you're going to see a game over because of all that action platforming. If only they could have refined the action platformer sections, this could have been a much better game. Isolated Warrior also tried to blur that line, but they did it quite a bit better. Before I get too far into this, Isolated Warrior's name actually comes from the fact that it's added isometric view, which most of the time I completely hate, but you know what, for this, it kind of works. Also, they tend to absolutely love the color purple because most of your power-ups are that color as well as your main character. Now, also, you have a choice between a wide shot and a laser, but when you first start picking up the wide shot power-ups, you are going to end up with a pretty awful weapon with no straightforward shot, and this gets pretty darn awkward quick. But when you're fully powered up, you feel like an absolute boss. You also have some bombs that you can activate by hitting the jump button while you're already in the air, and this is the way to destroy bosses in absolute no time. Also, it's kind of impressive how fast enemies come at you in this game, and how many of them. Man, the developers really knew what they were doing, and this is definitely one of the most overlooked hidden gems on the platform, because, man, it's really hard to find now, and I really like the color purple too. But it's not my favorite hidden gem shooter on the little gray console. Take a look at Silkworm. Now this name is just plain stupid, and at first glance it looks like a normal helicopter shooter. You could shoot down at enemies and blow up stuff, as well as dodge all the enemy fire that's coming at you. You could also collect some power-ups after defeating a harder enemy, and even the boss battles look fairly generic, even if the sprites are large. I think they're actually done by being part of the background layer, and nothing too special goes on here, except for the fact that it's just like a horizontal version of Firepower 2000. That's right, a Jeep can be played in this game. The Jeep itself is super overpowered, and you have to jump over obstacles as well as dodge missiles coming at you. Not to mention, this game could be played 2-player at the same time, with one person in a helicopter and one person in the Jeep. And did I mention the Jeep is super powerful? The helicopter might be able to outmaneuver a lot of the enemies on the screen, but the overwhelming power of the Jeep will just push you through the game at lightning speed and downing bosses like freaking crazy. And I wish I had a jump button on my very own car. It would certainly make traffic a lot easier. This might be one of the most creative and best games you never even played on the original Nintendo. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it. I just wanted to do a hidden gems video on the NES, but sadly they were all started to be shooters when I started making this list, and I decided, well, I might as well run with it. So maybe I didn't talk about your favorite shooter for the system because maybe other people just talked them to death. I really like Legendary Wings, and Gun Knack is one of my all-time favorites. But if I happen to miss an epic shooter that I didn't talk about today, well, please let me know in the comments down below, or maybe even what system I should cover in the future. So until later, I will see you